In a psychic forecast, I see the San Andreas fault starting to wake up and become more active. I see cover-ups around government, around Donald Trump, including new insights into how long the Trump presidency may last. I see more surfacing around the Epstein case, as well as news about child trafficking getting exposed. A possible Northeast USA hurricane later in August into early September shows up in a vision, and other political economic news and more in a psychic forecast that we're going to cover the rest of August into September and going into October. So I'm going to start out with the San Andreas fault, including some information about the fault that's really interesting that you may not even know, that could actually put some minds to rest, basically. And remember, no matter how good, bad, or ugly things get, we're in an evolutionary process and a mass awakening cycle of humanity. And when that happens, when awakening happens, dramatic change has to happen in the society, and the earth responds to the changes of our energetic fields. So geological and climate changes have to happen also. But what I've seen time and time again, the prophecies, they come true, but not at the worst case scenario. And that just goes to show that we do have help from God, spirit, or source, or the extraterrestrials, or ascended masters, basically. And once again, timelines are fluid. The more positivity we put out there, the less we resist change, the more seamlessly and the easier the transition will happen, and the less people that have to suffer. So nothing here is written in stone. It's just a psychic forecast. But let me put my glasses on and get started here. So the San Andreas fault, more active. Like I said in the August psychic forecast, and I think it was it might have been the day after that I aired that video, that there was a 4.2 right on or right off the San Andreas, which might not seem like a lot, but it was the biggest tremor in 18 months there, and that's signs that it may be waking up. It could be old fault activity settling also. So we'll see how that goes, but I do feel that we do need to watch that again. So facts that you may have, if I can read my writing, facts that may have you less freaked out if you live there. So the last 8 magnitude earthquake, and that's the threshold for what they call a super earthquake or a mega earthquake, was in 1857 on the San Andreas. So megaquakes are quite rare on the San Andreas fault. As far as 6+ magnitude earthquakes, now 6 is roughly the threshold, depending on how deep the earthquake is, the bedrock. But at 6 magnitudes, roughly the threshold where you start to see significant damage from an earthquake. Over the last 125 years, since the year 1900, there's been 5 to maybe 7, we'll say 6, 5 to 7, 6+ earthquakes on or around the fault. You know, back in the past, measuring wasn't as sophisticated, so that's why the variance. And since including 1906, that was the big one in San Francisco. That was a 7.8 magnitude earthquake. The next highest one was the Lona Prieta one, which near Santa Cruz. That was a 6.9. I remember that being a 7, but I think they downgraded to do 6.9. And you see all the damage that was done. What year? Was that 1987? I didn't write the year down, but right around that time. And in all of California, there have been about 12 6+ magnitude earthquakes. There's other fault lines other than the San Andreas in California. And that would average to about 1 every 10 years or so of a 6+ magnitude. So truth be told, California is not even close to the most seismically active and dangerous region on the planet. So take that under consideration. But it is getting more active. We are overdue for a pretty big shake in that area. So it's good to be prepared and not scared, basically. Like all this, it's not doom and gloom. It's about awareness. And it's a really positive changes that are happening, but some old stuff has to fall, and it does create some negative outcomes. So stay in our hearts, stay in our power, vibrate with love, and help to teach those that are reachable and teachable to raise their vibration, and that'll help the collective. So I believe there could be an M6 or close to it in the next 6 weeks, primarily in Southern California, though the area north of San Francisco where the San Andreas starts to curve out to sea, that's highly suspect also, but I'm feeling more in the southern, near LA. LA's had a lot of karmic release lately. We talked about new fires in the August forecast. They've already begun. There's a lot of energy being released there, so for several reasons, I feel like there could be an earthquake, more fires, and floods and stuff like that. So, if you're in that area, again, be prepared for possible changes, basically. So, other areas to watch, the Ring of Fire still very, very active, more active. Watch the Philippines and Indonesia. The time that I'm filming this on the 12th of August, I'm aware that there was, I think it was there was a pretty big earthquake in Indonesia. I think it was yesterday or the day before. But anyway, New Zealand and around the Cascadia, the Cascadia subduction zone, which is off of Oregon and Washington, to the Aleutians, could be next. So New Zealand is very high up there, around the San Andreas, as well as the area from the Cascadia to the Aleutians. That could be the next one for a big earthquake. And I think a 7, roughly to maybe 7.5 is coming very soon. We'll see. It could be even higher than that. As I said, and I predicted for the July forecast that there'd be a big earthquake in the Russia-Japan area. And then later on the month, got the exact date, local time. After it happened, I kind of went in there intuitively to feel the energy, and it felt more like the fault system was venting rather than releasing. And for an 8.8 magnitude, the sixth strongest measure, that is just unfathomable. You would think it would be a major release, the whole fault system would relax, but I think there's more to come. And again, there's a lot of solar stuff. There's a lot going on that's increasing the seismic activity, not to mention consciousness. So anyway, volcanoes also very active. That was part of the forecast too. And though hasn't been any single blockbuster volcano, there's been some very sizable ones off Russia. I forgot the name of the peninsula, but the 8.8 magnitude has spurred some volcanic activity, some very significant. Kilauea is in record eruption, although I think it's simmered down now. There's Indonesia, there's Italy, there's the Canary Islands, although that's inactive. There've been a rash of 2 magnitude and under earthquakes under the Canary Islands, but I think that's just fluids going through the magma chambers, not lava itself. Same with Mount Rainier and the west. All these areas we have to keep an eye on. West Yellowstone more active, but I don't think a big eruption, but more smaller eruptions, yes. Watch out around Rainier, Mount St. Helens. So volcanic activity around the world, very, very active. Let me go back into my notes. Major eruptions going on in Russia. Okay, Kilauea. All right, feels like one more major eruption will happen soon. The Pacific Northwest, keep your eyes open around this time, especially in September. South America, which gets a lot more earthquakes, by the way, than California does, can get very, very active again. And I can't read my writing. Around somewhere, okay. He's called my paper up around. Anyway, around. I wrote around Etna, so that's around Italy also. Again, I may not hit the exact locations. A lot of volcanic activity. The Earth's heating up, and it's releasing ash. And again, there hasn't been a blockbuster, but all these smaller to moderate events going on in the world that does send ash into the stratosphere. And I do think that's leading to a cooling of the atmosphere. But I'll get into that in a second. So So the Canary Islands have had, we talked about, we're near quieted down for now anyway, so that's good. Volcanoes can affect the weather, change the magnetic and electrical planetary circuitry also, affect the Schumann resonance as well. So, when we have these volcanic eruptions, when we have the earthquakes, when we have the solar activity, it affects the Schumann resonance, which is basically the low frequency heartbeat of the earth. It's an energetic field that drives everything, including our brain waves, including everything that happens in the physical 3D. So anyway, another round of flooding around August 25th, maybe in September. We've had record flooding already, so we're trending a little bit into the weather now. Tropical system after Erin, so we're aware of tropical storm, soon to be Hurricane Erin. It's also likely to start to cool here in the Midwest and the Northeast. It's been very hot lately, so we see a cooling cycle beginning. That frontal system is probably going to keep Erin out to sea, though it's too early to know. But all along, I was feeling later in August, Erin's going to be off our coast. I'm in New York, probably early next week, maybe closer to Bermuda, based on recent data. So, with a lot of the geological and meteorological stuff, because I'm a trained meteorologist, I've studied a lot of earth science. I trend into science as well as utilizing my intuition and combine the two. But in any event, I was feeling when I did the August forecast more around August 25th and maybe later on for some kind of flooding, tropical activity, maybe a tropical storm even, or a downgraded hurricane in the Northeast. That could be New England or Nova Scotia also, but keep an eye on that. Midwest, Northeast gets cooler. And so I'm putting on my meteorology hat now, and this probably keeps Erin offshore. So series of 3 hurricanes I'm seeing in maybe the next 6 weeks or so around the U.S., Erin being one. One in the central Gulf, slow mover, significant damage. This was a vision that I had. So watch out around like New Orleans, roughly in that area around the northern mid Gulf. 2 East Coast, 1 makes landfall, possibly 2 landfall, dramatic flooding they were showing. But remember, we have the ability to modify the weather through consciousness. Again, we have that power, and as we are awakening, more and more people are discovering that, and science through quantum physics and other means are starting to at least ponder the possibility. So that is huge if science is at least open to the possibility that consciousness affects weather. Certainly technology affects it. Why not consciousness, right? If we through consciousness, if we can invent technology that can modify weather, and there's pages upon pages of geoengineering experiments on government websites, and it may be being used covertly or even nefariously, possibly. Why that would validate that consciousness can also. Native Americans, when they prayed for rain and they got together and pooled their consciousness, it usually rained because they were feeling the rain and they were thanking the Creator for the rain that was already happening. So creating that rather than wishing it to happen, and then you push it farther away. But I'm getting a little bit sidetracked. So let me get back into the forecast. Fall likely in general. Or earlier fall, so we may see a later summer cool down. We're going to see that in midsummer, but I mean, later, towards Labor Day. They could be significant, and winter's likely to feature more nor'easters. Our area has virtually had no nor'easters in like half a decade, which is crazy. I think we're going to see the return to significant nor'easters, polar vortex being in the news more. Midwest, northern plains, down into the southeast, as well as the northeast, could be in for a colder winter this year. So anyway, what else? Storm track in the west of the United States can track more directly into California, so we could see a lot of mudslides and flooding there. I'm not going to go too much into the global weather patterns for the later summer and the fall. But just suffice it to say, lots of ups and downs, areas of significant heat, areas of flooding, tropical system possible in Hawaii, central South Big Island. I was seeing anomalous weather continues, heats, floods, and fires. The biggest news, Earth releasing a lot of energy. Solar activity feeds the storms and the weather extremes, as well as the geological effect. And in the monthly forecasts, I try to narrow in on the location to get more details. So this is more of an overview right now. But in the August forecast, I did that, and the September forecast will do the same. So we also see the polar shift is happening. The magnetic field is weakening. That's going to also bring about big climatic changes, change the ocean currents. It's already happening. And this is, going to lead to, maybe not tomorrow or even this year, but it's going to lead to more devastating solar flares, coronal mass ejection, because the magnetic field is weakening in lead of a polar flip or shift here on planet Earth. It happens, from what I understand, about every 6,000 years or so. It's a natural cycle, but everything gets very, very crazy on the Earth, and sometimes there's mass extinctions and mass changes. But that said, it's not doom and gloom, because we know more now, and we know how to prepare. We know how to maybe utilize technology and consciousness to mitigate some of the more damaging effects. It's just nature, it's just happening. So anyway, space weather increases. All right. So anyway, after the 15th, so that's coming right up. But later in the month could get very active. Solar flares, powder outages, European blackouts. I was being shown in a vision. New York area, but more regional than widespread, probably. Southwest, early in the summer, I got this image of the whole Southwest into Mexico being dark, like the lights out. Nothing's happened, and I'm happy for that, and may that continue to be the case. But it's an interesting image, and at this point, I feel like if this could be more related to things going on in the earth or the weather than the sun. But I feel like if something happens, like a widespread power outage in that region, I think it's going to get solved sooner than later. So hang in there, but have your supplies just in case. I understand it's very hot this time of year there. So anyway, also they were showing me. Let me see. Super impactful event, possibly more from geology. All right, so that's hard to say. But anyway, back to the forecast. There can be controlled blackouts where there's an agenda, and turning the lights out or holding back supplies might serve as an agenda. It's usually to centralize power and money at the expense of the masses. But anyway, I was seeing that mystery fog again. That's come up in my mind a few times over the last week, which I think means, because it's what I associate with it, it's not necessarily the truth, though I believe it is. But I think it means that there may be some strange, some strange things happening with these fogs or things that appear natural, but that are really man-made, and possibly to conceal chemicals or pathogens or parasites. These are conspiracy theories that came up around that, but there is enough, supporting evidence through observation and other means that it's worth at least, checking it out and investigating that further. So anyway, and there could be like unusual smoke from fires that could contain chemicals, things like that. So keep an eye out on that kind of activity, or something similar to the mystery fog speculated to carry parasites or pathogen. So sky anomalies increasing. We talked about in the August. We talked about in the July. We talked about in the June. Then we had 3I Atlas that was first discovered, I think, in the very last day of July, or right around that. That's a huge asteroid, a rogue space rock that's traveling at record speeds into our solar system. Now, I'll talk more about that in a minute. Sky anomalies, increase of UFO, aliens, etc. And we talked about that. So, appears as a giant comet, fastest moving object yet. Now, I feel like this could be some kind of a probe, to be honest. Much older than the Earth, from a different galaxy, or the edge of this galaxy, basically. And so I don't think it's like a threat to the earth or anything like that, or anybody gathering information. But this could be from a distant star sending out probes to learn more about the cosmos, basically, and then it became rogue. But if it is a distant rock, like a super comet, it's going to energize the conscious field, because that's what's happening now with the Perseid and the Earth passing through the Swift Tuttle debris field. These are all portals of information. Comets are space travelers. They gather information and then they get released into the earth fields and conscious fields as they burn up in our atmosphere. So lots of new information is probably going to be unveiled as this comet gets closer to the sun and the earth. New downloads, new information. And I may do a remote viewing and see if I can get more information on that later. If so, I'll do a separate video on that. Now, politics and the economic front, big government exposure, or big exposures of government-related cover-ups, basically. That could be involving Donald Trump. That could be involving the Democrats. That could be involving both. That could be involving other organizations within the government. There's been corruption and things covered up for a very long time. It's not new, but I do think that things are getting exposed as these higher energies are hitting the conscious field. Things that have been held under wraps no longer can, and they get exposed and more people see it, basically. So part of this is how illegal operations get funded by governments in this and other countries, and yes, by the U.S. government to other countries. Big cover-up around Trump. Was it voter fraud? Honestly, I think there's been some level of voter fraud or manipulation virtually, if not literally, every election. I don't think that would be the thing that would jeopardize his presidency at this point, but something to keep an eye on, because I know it's been investigated, and I think it's an ongoing thing. I think if there was a situation where he steps down, I think this is more likely around health issues, as well as just pushback, bipartisan pushback. And I'll get more into that in a second. But you may recall around May, I had this stark vision. And when I have a clear vision like that, it's rarely wrong. I mean, virtually it's always right. And I saw him as clear as day in my mind, in the hospital, motionless, with a lot of like IVs and stuff around him. Now, I didn't know what was going on. I thought maybe he was going to get sick, and to keep an eye out for that. So what happened, and it may have been right when I filmed that video or when I got the vision or a few days after, he had pulled back from social media for about 3 days, which is very odd for Donald Trump. And meetings were missed. This is what I've heard, through various sources anyways. And then when he came back, he looked frail. He was tripping a lot. We saw those clips. There were allegations that he had some bad odors, that maybe he's wearing diapers. He just didn't look good. I have a feeling that there was a procedure that was done during that time. Now, I have to say, recently, and I only see a few clips here and there, he has looked better to me. So, we don't, no matter what your views are, hopefully nobody wishes him ill. I'll put it that way. But in any event, I think that there are undisclosed health issues, and that's likely to come out. Now, there was around Ronald Reagan, and JFK. He had about, I don't know how many different. Did he have Addison? He had some serious stuff going on. It's all been covered up, but we're in a new era. These types of cover-ups may not be okay anymore. And also Epstein. Now, we talked about in the August that the Clintons were going to come up again, that I've seen them coming up in the news. Well, they came up in the news. In July, the forecast was for witch hunts and people, being accused of various. Obama came up. All right, so we know that. More to be revealed. The original forecast was for September for there to be some partial reveal. I think it's in motion. We'll see to what extent it comes up, because there are forces that govern these things, and things get done in a certain way for political reasons and motivations. So in any event, for the next week or so, some major news could come up around who might have been involved with that, as well as some major news or something happening, something specific that could threaten the Trump presidency about 6 weeks following that or so. That was part of the August also. Exposures are bigger than Trump, by the way. It may be that it affects him, but they're definitely bigger than him. And no matter what your views, we're in a new time in history now. And never in the past would anybody with his alleged record of corruption, think of the Trump College, think of the rape allegations, think of the friendship with a known sex child trafficker, an ongoing friendship, involvement in an insurrection while in office. And I'm not accusing Trump of any of this or anything. But what the point that I'm trying to make is what was unthinkable just maybe a decade earlier is now normalized, basically. And that would include like his manners and the way that he talks to the press and talks to people and stuff like that. This just would not happen. And now it's completely normalized. And that kind of provides further validation that the powers that be, whether you want to call them the cabal, the deep state, whatever name, those elitists of the world that control the politics, the governments, the corporations, the flow of money, want him in power because there is so much that could have knocked him off of power already. So this is the time to just use your logic, use your critical thinking skills now, and know that the programming is normalizing things that are just not normal. So in any event, Trump to be president. Okay, so provides further validation. Powers that be want Trump to be president. If they want him out, they will find a way. So look out for the next several weeks because that way may surface, is the point that I'm making. And look for this potential to unfold towards the end of September into October. It's hard to get specific timing on anything because timelines are fluid. And my original forecast was for around July into August. Obviously, that's not happening, so... Point B, that's the point. So anyway, and it's hard for me to get specific because it mattered. I'm an American. Even though I'm nonpartisan, I'm not for Trump, I'm not against Trump. I see some good, I see some not so good. Same with the prior president. It's still hard for me to get out of the way because it affects my life. So what I did when I did attempt to remote view recently, I saw him at Mar-a-Lago. Mar-a-Lago? Am I even mispronouncing that? Mar-a-Lago, or somewhere separate from the White House for some reason. So that would validate that there still could be a removal, or there could be some kind of an uprising or something where we separated temporarily. Anyway, though I still think that health, for a 79-year-old president, that would remain, one of the things to really, really keep an eye out, as well as, corruption surfacing. So, on top of that, I was seeing emergency meetings, National Security, Congress, Supreme Court, UN, any one of the above, based on changes in the political structures, violence, protests around the world, not just in the United States, Europe, Australia, Germany, which is part of Europe, all over. Economy gets a bit more erratic, as time goes on. Changes in companies, businesses go bankrupt, change around Federal Reserves, currency value shifting and stuff like that. The tariffs, being modified and modified again. So it's more like a nervous economy, but I don't think it's crashing at this point. But I've seen some changes in oil futures towards the end of the month that could impact the economy and housing prices going down, I want to say. So it could be a little bit of leaning towards recession energy, but I don't think we're there or getting there at this point. So anyway, proposals for gold standards by year's end pops up. Meetings of Russia could lead to positive changes towards around October, leading to the end of the war. So the meeting's happening on Friday in Alaska. There's also meetings in Germany with Zelensky, Putin and Trump. NATO, and then of course there's many other wars and conflicts going on around the world, but that's getting the spotlight right now. So anyway, I see possible swift operation in Gaza, then troops pulling out. That'd be Israelis, maybe U.S. or British backed. I'm not really keeping an eye on the news, so if there's any inaccuracies about the current events, excuse me, but I don't really watch the news, except I try to get some headlines so that I can kind of sync that in with what I'm getting intuitively and what I'm feeling, basically. So other than that, war is profitable, shifts the world's power and the world's structure. The major ones in the news anyway are largely predetermined, as per a vision that I've shared a few times on the channel, where we're seeing heads of state, like Trump and Putin, heads of state, generals of the military meeting behind closed doors. In the vision, it was in Ukraine or in that area, but it could be anywhere. And they weren't planning peace. They were planning steps in war. So they were strategizing that. Again, it's just a vision. I can misinterpret. You could take it somewhere with a grain of salt, but we do know the trend of global power, that war is a big driver of that, as well as the economy. So just think, the more aware and awake we are, the less that challenging things are going to negatively impact our life. So it's time to be aware and time to awaken. So start to see, and also I start to see the reality of the split society we've been talking about here in the channel since 2021 in earnest, basically. Meaning that as there's more AI control, more technological control, less sovereignty, more surveillance, social credit scores, interfacing, dictation of what we can and cannot do with our bodies, future pandemics and stuff like that. There's going to be those that are going to really be starting sustainable communities. It's already happening. So we're going to see that movement continuing to later greater or lesser degree connected with mainstream society, where the mainstream that goes more in the technology and the control and farther away from our spiritual involvement, in the organic sense, as it were, more in the town, villages, and cities, the smart cities, all that stuff. So we start to see that. I don't think it's going to last forever. And the more that we can ascend in consciousness as a collective, the less impactful or the less dramatic that shift will be. But it is happening, and a lot of us, and we're going to be planning here on the channel, some activity like that, so that we can be, living our lives and developing our spirituality, our lives, our directions in lives, our awakening, all that stuff, continuing more in human evolution, and maybe understanding the technology can serve our spiritual growth and awakening, but when it's in the wrong hands, it squashes it. Eventually, it's all going to reintegrate. We're going to come into the golden age. Now's the time of the split, the big change. Over the next, it could be 10 or 20 years, and maybe less. But in any event, that's really what I'm getting for the psychic forecast. And again, remember that the timelines are fluid, and this is one of the primary reasons that there's a lot of chaos in the world. We have certain faction or forces. You can argue Donald Trump into that. Certain forces or powers that are invoking chaos, but out of chaos comes order. So the chaos invoked is going to get things to surface that need to surface in order to restore greater order and to ascend into a higher spiritual level, but also a higher level of society that's more fair and just for everybody, basically. So because it's all shifting and a lot of people are being displaced and suffering, as has to happen during this shift, the old towers have to fall. Old earth has to fall for new earth to be reborn. We're doing more and more energy work here on the channel. We're getting together to do group prayers, to send energy into the collective fields. And we're doing that in our live streams now. And I may do some downloads with that also. So join our live streams and be part of this energy. Let's all be part of the solution to smooth out the rough edges of the earth changes, so less people suffer, so things happen more quickly, more easily, and that we are able to reach our next level of spiritual ascension and human evolution. So more details, including more events on the August psychic forecast is right here. Some of these things have already verified. And here we'll post one of a recent channeling that we did for our own spiritual growth. Thank you for sticking this one out. I love you, and we'll see you at the next video.